The problem with Richardson is you cannot trust him. You cannot call a game and expect him to execute the plays the way they're needed to be executed. I mean, still has much learning to do.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It's a teaching tutorial Thursday. That means it's Greg Cosell time. By the way, programming note. Next week will be the last week with only 3 episodes. The week after that, NFL regular season week 1, we will be back to 5 episodes on this show. And of course, even money and college draft, etc. I highly encourage you to make sure you're signed up to get the email newsletter. We only send one out about once every 3 or 4 months, but we have major news as it relates to our shows that I think, and in fact know, you'll be very fired up about, that will be announced next week. So I'll probably do it first on the email newsletter. We'll definitely relay it on these shows as well, but major news as it relates to multiple shows will be announced next week. It's something we're very, very fired up about. I'm very fired up for NFL preseason week 3 and always the chance to talk with the civilian GOAT, Greg Cosell. There were a ton of trades yesterday, by the way, that we need to get into. And I did take the time this week to pick winners. Those of you that go the extra mile, whether you're rating and reviewing the show or spreading the word via social media at Ross Tucker Pod, giving us a comment on the YouTube, or just taking advantage of any of the sponsors like my boy Norm, who used the Game Time app for athletics tickets. I can't even imagine how much those tickets were anyway. And then he got the discount using our code at Game Time. At any rate, plenty to get to with Greg Cosell. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
Okay, Greg, before I forget, there were a bunch of trades yesterday. Jack and I will get into them later. Sky Moore, Devaughn, Vele, Harrison Phillips, Jawan Briggs. Any of those guys really jump out to you? I mean, in terms of draft pick compensation, the one that probably surprises people, the Saints gave up a 4th-round pick for Devaughn Vele. They might like that guy.
Well, it's funny. I did him coming out of college, Utah, I believe, and I really liked him. He's big. Obviously, he's not a burner, and that's why he was drafted later. He had a very good rookie season for the Broncos. I expected him to become a bigger part of their offense, but that obviously tells me that the Broncos really like Troy Franklin, that he's come on as a second-year player. They drafted Pat Bryant from Illinois in the 3rd round. He's another player whose tape I liked in college, so they obviously have liked what they've seen of him through the offseason and training camp. But Vele is big. As I said, he's not a burner, but he can work the middle of the field. The Saints are obviously looking for receivers. So, I think he's actually, a pretty good player. He's not going to be a volume target. You're not going to see him with 80 catches, but he's a nice, depending on the rest of your receiving core, he's sort of that like 2 plus, maybe a 3. But I liked his tape from a year ago.
Trying to think about the Saints receivers. I actually have them, Greg, week 1 for CBS, Cardinals at the Saints. And it's like Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Brandon Cooks, Mason Tipton. They don't really have a bigger guy that I can think of off the top of my head.
And their first 3 are certainly not bad. Shaheed, obviously, we know he can run. When you do your work on that, you'll see that with his tape. And Olave, of course, I guess the concern is that he doesn't get any more concussions, but he's obviously a very skilled receiver. And wherever Cooks has been, he's produced. He's later in his career, but he puts up numbers.
Speaking of the Saints, while we're on them, I think maybe, Greg, and we'll get into Flacco and Daniel Jones, but I think maybe, unless I'm forgetting a team, the Saints might be the only team that haven't announced their starting quarterback for week 1 as of yet. It's a 2-man battle between Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shuck. At different times, you've had positive things to say about both those guys. Not that you've studied them, in depth with their preseason stuff, but any thoughts on those two guys and the Saints taking their time to make this decision?
Yeah, I've looked at both in detail preseason, and of course I did both guys in detail when they came out of college. Shuck this year and Rattler, a couple of years ago. I could see why it's a tough call. Both guys throw the ball really well. There's no problem with their arm talent, their throwing ability. Shuck is just a bigger guy, looks more the part because of his size, and he's an easy thrower, although Rattler is as well. They both can throw with velocity. They both can make, and I hate to say this cliche, but it's true, they both can make every throw. There's no issue with what you have to do offensively in terms of limiting how you go about calling a game because of perceived limitations in their throwing. And I've looked at both guys in detail in the preseason, Ross, and I can understand why Kellen Moore is I don't want to say he's struggling. I'm sure he has a sense. He's not required to name it so we could talk about it today. But if he is struggling a bit, I could certainly understand that because I think the tape, it doesn't appear to me that one has played significantly better or worse than the other, to be honest with you.
Their preseason stats, which is just one part of it, are like eerily similar. I mean, it's crazy actually how similar their preseason statistics are. The reality is, Greg, and I don't want to say I hate to say it, but it seems pretty likely that they both would start games this year. In my head, it probably makes more sense to start Rattler and then, give him that opportunity. It makes more sense, I feel like, to go from Rattler to Shuck than Shuck to Rattler, if that makes sense. Shuck is the guy you just drafted in the second round, high in the second round.
Who's older than Rattler, by the way. But the thing is, so much of a quarterback situation like that, to me, then has to do with the rest of your team. And, because what happens with quarterbacks like that, you know how it is, Ross. You play it. If all of a sudden you're in games where the quarterback, by the nature of games, has to drop back 35, 40 times, 40 plus times, then it just doesn't work out well for the quarterback, and then everybody thinks the quarterback's not good enough, and the coach then flip-flops quarterbacks. You don't want to be in that situation. You'd love to be in a situation where the rest of your team can make it so that you really only have to call maybe 23 to 28 pass plays in a game, where it's not the quarterback's sole responsibility to be the defining figure of the offense and therefore the team.
Let's get to a couple other receivers. You mentioned Devaughn, Vele, but two other guys in the news I want to get your thoughts on. The Eagles traded for a receiver in John Metchie. Now, this is a little self-serving. I'm doing Eagles-Jets tomorrow night for Eagles television. I remember distinctly, Greg, you really liking Metchie coming out of Alabama. I mean, that was, I guess, 3 or 4 years ago now. And he's had the torn ACL, he's had the cancer. I mean, he's had a lot to go through. What did you like about him then? And or what have you seen from him in the pros so far?
Yeah, he's obviously has not played a ton in the NFL due to injuries, and he did have the cancer. I always liked John Metchie. When he came out of Alabama, I thought you could line him up both inside and outside, probably better suited to be more of a slot movement receiver than a true outside receiver, and I'm sure that's why the Eagles made the trade, because obviously they have A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. But, Metchie was a really refined route runner, good hands, good run after catch, tough, physical. I really like John Metchie, and I remember he got the cancer happened before the ACL, and of course, it was that's a tragic situation. Obviously, you're glad he's okay, but that derailed his career to a meaningful extent. But he's again, we don't know where he stands in his talent level based on the cancer and the injuries. But he was a really good prospect in my view coming out. Wasn't he a second round pick initially? I think
he was.
Yeah,
and, listen, guys go to other teams and they're able to turn it on. The Texans drafted a couple receivers high. I mean, they obviously did not think that Metchie was a guy that they wanted to have around anymore. Let's be honest.
And sometimes that happens. I mean, you do the Eagles, so you'll find out. But I'm not sure how well that speaks of Jahan Dotson's situation.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think he's had a good camp. He had a good first preseason game. So I don't know. I think he's in a good standing, but maybe they think Metchie can compete for that third role. I know this. They're going to try to have guys compete for every single spot, role, opportunity. How about this one, Greg? I forgot about this guy. I got to be honest with you. I watched him at Bama. I called one of his games at Bama. I saw him at Texas. Totally forgot he got arrested before the draft. And then all of a sudden this week, the Browns signed Isaiah Bond,
Yeah.
3 years, $3 million, fully guaranteed, the speedster from Texas. I'm sure you did him when he was coming out, Greg.
Oh, I did.
What did you remember about Bond?
I did him 2 years in a row. I did him at Alabama when he was a vertical player because he has great speed, and then at Texas when he wasn't really used that much that way. A lot of tunnel screens, a lot of shorter throws. He's a guy that I wonder where he would have been drafted. He wasn't if the character was 100% clean. Because I remember when I did him, and then I looked at all his measurables are almost to the letter exactly those of Jalen Waddle. Now, I'm not suggesting he would have been a top 10 pick, Ross. None of us know that. But his measurables are exactly the same, and he can run. So, again, the character issue was pretty severe because he was arrested before the draft, if memory serves me correctly. So, we don't know. The Browns are obviously looking for receivers because right now their top two are Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman, who's unproven. And after that, I think they're searching. And even with Tillman, you don't know yet at this point in his NFL career. So we'll see. I mean, the character was, I think, the main issue with him.
While we're talking about the Browns, let me get your reaction to them naming Joe Flacco the starting quarterback. I know you and I are both fans of Flacco. I will say, Greg, it didn't go very well when he started those couple games for the Colts last year. And I don't know how much of that was him or the guys around him. It did not go very well for Joe in Indy last year. Now he's back to being the starting quarterback for the Browns. Curious to get your thoughts and or reaction.
Yeah, my sense is if Kenny Pickett did not get hurt, the battle would have been between Flacco and Pickett. I think the other stuff was just a lot of noise. Flacco, you know what you're going to get with Flacco. First of all, he runs that style of offense, which is quarterback under center, play action. That's what Flacco has done a large part of his career. Obviously he's an aggressive thrower, so there are times where he makes throws that you just, you go, why'd you make that throw? But then he also still has the ability to make phenomenal throws. To me, this was not really a surprise announcement. Once Pickett got hurt, I pretty much figured it would be Flacco. No team, contrary to what people think, goes into a season saying, well, you know what, we don't care if we lose games and, we'll see what happens then next year in the draft. No team thinks like that, Ross. They're trying to win football games. And there's no question at this point in time that Joe Flacco gives them the best chance to line up and compete.
Pretty clearly, I think, Greg, that's the same decision that Shane Steichen made in Indy with the Colts with Daniel Jones. This is not being very well received, Greg. Most people want Anthony Richardson to start. Certainly it feels like fans and media. I think you said this offseason as soon as they signed Daniel Jones that he was going to be their starter. I said on multiple platforms, including here yesterday, this is the dichotomy, in my opinion, Greg, between fans, media, and coaches. Fans and media love potential and upside and traits. The coaches want the guy that they can trust and he's going to execute the offense and give them the best chance to win.
You know what? You nailed it. I was just going to say that, Ross, that it's a matter of trust with your quarterback. No one is suggesting that Daniel Jones is now a top 5 quarterback in the league. People are talking about it as if, Daniel Jones, number one, people talk about it as if he stinks. Well, we don't know that. He was with a really bad situation with the Giants with no O-line. People may forget he had a very good rookie season where people thought he'd be a really good player. The problem with Richardson is you cannot trust him. You cannot call a game and expect him to execute the plays the way they're needed to be executed. I mean, he still has much learning to do as far as playing the position, reading coverage, understanding where defenders are, moving, manipulating defenders, knowing where to go with the football based on what he sees. He's still very raw as a pocket player. Now, can he make a special play? Of course he can. And in situations where the run element for the quarterback matters, is he really good? Of course he is. But you have, coaches, it's a play-by-play deal in the NFL. And there's so many things that go into playing quarterback, for instance, I hope a lot of people have seen the quarterback series that we at NFL Films did, where you see what happens before the ball is even snapped. And, there's just elements of the quarterback position that Richardson still has a lot of work to do. And what happens is you end up limiting what you can call. And that's where the issue comes in. There's just not enough of a trust factor.
Yeah, and I don't know if I said this on yesterday's show, Greg, but when I called the Titans at the Colts last year, a couple weeks earlier, a bunch of the best players for the Colts, it might have been the week before, had sat down with Anthony Richardson to talk about what the expectations are for walkthrough, what the expectations are for him for meetings. I mean, this was like DeForest Buckner, Quentin Nelson, Zaire Franklin, Jonathan Taylor. This is more than midway through his second year, Greg, and they had to sit him down and say, listen, man, this is what it should look like when we're doing this stuff.
The NFL, Anthony. Yeah.
Yeah, and in fairness to him, maybe he didn't know what he didn't know. I don't know, but they were certainly trying to. I asked him if it was more on the field or off the field, and he told me both when I asked him about it. You forget, Greg, he's such a young man. He's like 22.
I know. And don't forget, people forget because they just see the games. It's even true in preseason, Ross, and you know this. Do the games matter? Yes. But in terms of evaluation, the games are probably the least important thing that the coaches look at in preseason, especially if a guy plays 20 plays, because they're with these guys every single day, literally for 10, 12 hours a day. So, they know so much more about these players than we do. They're with them every day. So that little anecdote about Richardson and the veterans is such a great anecdote. I'm sure a lot of people are not aware of that.
Did you get a chance, Greg, to check out Caleb Williams the other night? Because I don't get too overboard with preseason games. You know that. I will say, man, he did some good things, and it was nice to see him under center, Greg. We talk about that all the time. It was nice to see him have some under center play action.
Well, I think what you're looking for with Caleb Williams, and I've said this many times to you and in other places, the guy throws the ball beautifully. That's not an issue at all. I mean, he's just such a beautiful, easy thrower of the football. But I think what you're looking for is a refinement when it comes to timing and rhythm. And, Ben Johnson's obviously very, very good at what he does in designing route concepts. And whether it was quote unquote game planned or not, probably not. That's not relevant. But what you're looking for is him playing with a refined sense of timing and rhythm so that he could hit his back foot and the ball would come out. We know he throws a beautiful ball. We know he has outside of structure above the X's and O's ability. We know he can do those things. But you're looking for him to play the game within structure at a high level so he hits his back foot and can deliver the football. That's what you're looking for. That's what the Ben Johnson offense demands. That's what he wants. So that's what you were looking for in the game, and he did it. Now, what that means, we don't know, but obviously that would be my sense that if Ben Johnson, if you gave him truth serum, that's what he wants. He wants him to hit his back foot. He wants him to look like Jared Goff. I mean, the way Jared Goff plays in the Lions offense.
Well, theoretically, right, if Ben Johnson can get him to do that, you could have Jared Goff plus the second reaction if you need it.
Yeah.
That would be it. Although, as you know, Greg, we talk about this all the time. No coach calls a play, and the quarterback goes in the huddle and says, all right, second reaction play, on two, ready, break.
Right.
That's not a thing. They feel good about the first reaction. That's why they called the play.
Correct.
Now, do they love if you can help them out if it's not a great play call? But the difference is some guys have to do the second reaction. Other guys realize before the snap it's not a good play call, and they adjust it to get into a good first reaction play before the ball is even snapped.
Here's a great point, Ross, and I've studied this for years and years and years and had many conversations about it. The guys who are second reaction players will make great plays, no question. But they have a strong tendency, and it's very subtle and very fine, they have a strong tendency to leave the pocket that millimeter of a second too early. So they end up leaving plays, the design plays on the field. The Jared Goffs of the world, while they're not going to give you the second reaction plays, they give you more in-structure plays. But it's a very fine line that it's very difficult to see if you're just watching a game on TV. So a Jared Goff stands there and it all happens, and he might take a hit, but the play happens the way it's supposed to happen. And they stay that extra, it's you almost can't even measure it. But that's what the quarterbacks who are true pocket guys do.
I'm going to ask you about his backup, Tyson Bagent. We'll go over it with Jack in the Tux Takes. But he signed a nice deal, Greg, after a couple years. I'm thrilled for him. A D2 guy getting $10 million for a couple years, that's hard to do.
No, and when he's played, in regular season games, he's actually looked okay. I mean, he's got a good arm. He's a good athlete. He's got decent size. He's obviously, the hope is in Chicago he doesn't have to take a snap unless it's victory snaps at the end of games that they're winning big. But he's shown that he was it 2 years? Yeah, it was 2 years ago that he played, right? He played as a starter. And again, this is not an X and O comment, but I just remember watching him and thinking it didn't look like he didn't belong. It looked like he belonged out on the field in an NFL game.
Real quick, Greg, Brian Robinson, Commanders running backs on the trade market. A little surprised by that.
Me too.
What is he?
Me too. He's a grinder. I like him. He is what he is. He's a hard-nosed, tough inside grinder, gets hard yards. I mean, that's what he is. So, they obviously feel that they have someone else who can do that. They have Chris Rodriguez, who came out of Kentucky a few years ago, who theoretically is the same guy. They probably like him. So I would... you're surprised and you're not surprised because, obviously Robinson is not a game breaker.
They like this Bill guy, McCoskey Merritt or whatever.
Oh, yeah, I didn't do him coming out because he really didn't play that much in college.
Yeah, they like him a lot. I like you, Greg. I like when you're on the show. I'm fired up for next week. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ross. Appreciate it.
All right, let's dive into the news. But first, I will do a taste test with any of you if I see you and you think that there's a light beer that has more flavor than Labatt Blue or Labatt Blue Light. There's no such thing. It does not exist. It's so good when it touches your lips. Shout out Will Ferrell. Shout out Buy Beer, Get Gear from Labatt. Go to the website, snap a photo of your receipt, upload it instantly, rack up points. The fridge is sick. The cooler backpack, if you see me at the Jersey Shore this weekend after Eagles Jets Friday night, I'll probably have the cooler backpack on. Rewards.labattusa.com.
Tux Takes.
All right, Ross, some news around the league. The Titans, they activate their corner, L'Jarius Sneed. Dolphins, they bring up and activate tight end Darren Waller. And the Chiefs, they place former first-round pick FAU on the IR with a hamstring injury, which will end his season.
Well, the Titans need Sneed desperately. I think Greg talked about that at some point in the offseason, so that's huge. And Felix Anudike-Uzomah, there's something weird there. I mean, to already be season-ending IR with a hamstring injury, this is year 3 for him. He's done very, very little. If you remember, Emory Hunt got a lot of critique on the College Draft podcast for not having him ranked very high. Looks like Emory might have been right.
Boatload of trades yesterday. That includes the Chiefs. They trade receiver Sky Moore and a 7th rounder. The 49ers for a 6th rounder. One you mentioned earlier, the Broncos, they trade wide receiver Devaughn Vele to the Saints for a 4th and a 7th rounder. Vikings trade defensive tackle Harrison Phillips and a 7th rounder to the Jets for 2 6th round picks. And the Browns, they trade defensive tackle Jawan Briggs and a 7th to the Jets for a 6th rounder.
So if it's a player and a 7th for a 6th, a lot of times that means that guy was probably going to get cut and that the team just wanted him now so that he has a couple weeks to get ready for the first game, and because they didn't want to take the chance of not getting him on waivers. So that's Briggs and that's Sky Moore. If it's more than that, then they had other people that wanted him, right? So that's Devaughn Vele. Other people wanted that receiver. For them to get a 4th and a 7th, or for the Jets to get 2 6th rounders, or to give up 2 6th rounders for Harrison Phillips, they really wanted a D tackle. The Jets got 2 D tackles yesterday, which means they were not happy with the guys they had at D tackle at all.
And some other news, that includes a 3-game suspension for 49ers wide receiver Demarcus Robinson. One you mentioned earlier, a new contract for Bears backup quarterback Tyson Bagent. And there's a new partnership between the league and Microsoft that's going to be bringing AI to the field.
So there was just like an announcement yesterday about this NFL Microsoft AI thing. I feel like I need a lot more information as to what that really means. I'm curious about that one. What does that mean in terms of AI in the tablets when they're on the sideline? I need a lot more info there. Demarcus Robinson, that seems to be the 3 games seems to be the alcohol related offense. I'm not exactly sure, why a guy like Rashee Rice has a hearing, but I guess we'll find out. And then the Bagent thing, man, that warms my heart. I think Jack, how I feel. I want every guy or as many guys as possible to get financial security for their families. For him to talk about not having running water, his dad not having running water growing up, and now he's going to get $10 million over the next 2 years. So happy for that young man and his family. That is what it's all about. I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. A lot of anniversaries, September, October, which means a lot of people need gifts, either for themselves or their parents. Myfrontpagestory.com is where it's at. And I'll send you something signed in the mail if you want it. Backofficescheduler.com, humanheadnyc.com, Sporticulture, Pizza Boy Brewing.